After the massive success that was the Four Nations Tournament, which was a huge win for the NHL and hockey as a sport, there's talks that the NHL may consider canceling the 2026 All-Star Game. And this will be way worse for the New York Islanders than you're probably thinking, especially considering they're the team that is supposed to be hosting this event. We're going to be talking about that in more detail on this episode of Islanders Digest and really breaking down how this could be problematic for the New York Islanders. But before we get into that, be sure to subscribe to the channel, be one of our first 100 subscribers. If you're an Islander fan and you want more Islanders content, this is the channel for you. Now, let's get right into this report, and basically, Pierre LeBrun says the NHL is considering an 84-game schedule for the future in the 2026 or 2020 season, and in addition, they're considering canceling the 2026 All-Star Game. Now, it's really interesting, first of all, that the NHL is considering an 84-game schedule. I personally think the 82-game schedule is perfect. Really, you don't need more games to decide which teams are better than the rest. And you really wouldn't get that much more revenue from adding 2 more games. Granted, any revenue is more revenue, which is why the owners are going to want to do this. And I do think there also is a concern that we're kind of losing rivalries, especially as seasons. You want to see each team play in each arena every single season. And as a result, you have teams like the Islanders who aren't playing the Rangers as much as you'd like to see. That being said, I do think adding 2 more games to the schedule could add to injury, but the main thing we do want to talk about here is the NHL potentially canceling this All-Star Game. Now, this is a big deal for the Islanders and UBS Arena because they're supposed to be hosting this All-Star Game. And even though the All-Star Game has not gotten the best reception, especially in the past years, the NHL has been trying to make changes here and there, trying to make the 3-on-3 format, doing little things in the skill competition to try to make it more interesting. The All-Star Game has been struggling, but that being said, this is still a major sports event that the Islanders and UBS Arena were definitely excited to be hosting. I mean, if you look recently at how the Islanders are trying to sell season tickets for next season, a big part of what they're trying to sell is that the Islanders are going to be hosting the All-Star Game. And it's something they're really proud of and something they're really pushing in marketing. So that is definitely going to be a problem for the New York Islanders marketing team, especially if they've already made these promises for season ticket holders to get excited about the All-Star Game, and now it might not be happening. Now, nothing is set in stone. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the Islanders do end up still hosting this All-Star Game, and maybe it becomes the last All-Star Game, or at least the last All-Star Game as we know it. I think especially after the success of the Four Nations Tournament, which I'm definitely going to talk about later in this video. I definitely think the NHL is either going to make major changes to the All-Star Game or potentially get rid of it. It's definitely an event that has not been going well. As you can see, they would not be talking about canceling the All-Star Game if the All-Star Game was getting great reviews. That being said, for the Islanders, this can definitely be a problem because other than the All-Star Game next season, at least so far, there is not really that much for season ticket salespeople to really push. And the Islanders are struggling a bit in attendance. Now, this really hasn't been an issue in the past few seasons. The Islanders have been a better franchise, and therefore, all those attendance woes that we've been talking about for so many years have finally seemed to go away. But now they're beginning to creep back in. Now, granted, the Islanders are, I think they are 8th worst in attendance. That is not the worst in the NHL. They could be in a lot worse of a situation. They're still averaging about 93% capacity. And keep in mind, their rating on this standing is really close to how well they're currently playing. I mean, they're around 9th in the standings, and they are 8th in the attendance, 8th worst. So it really makes sense why the Islanders are struggling. And the best way for the Islanders to sell more season tickets would be to change this roster that fans have been calling for them to change for years. Even if they are not the best team next season, if there are several younger players on this roster and it looks and feels different, I guarantee people will sign up. That being said, for now, while you don't know what the roster is going to look like, something they've really been focusing on is that All-Star Game. So that can definitely be a problem for the Islanders. Granted, they could be in a worse situation. Teams like the Winnipeg Jets, who are winning and still struggling to fill the arena, that's definitely more of a concern than the Islanders have. But it is worth noting that this All-Star Game not happening could definitely have some effects for the team. Another thing you really want to talk about is this was definitely an opportunity. If it doesn't happen, it was definitely an opportunity for the Islanders to really showcase UBS Arena to the rest of the league. Sure, at this point, all the players in the NHL have already played games against the Islanders in UBS Arena, but this was more of an opportunity to really showcase the building, and that could definitely help a little bit with free agents. I'm not saying the Islanders are not going to land any big free agents in the next few seasons just because they lose their opportunity to host the All-Star game, but it could have an impact. And one thing that Islander fans are definitely going to be frustrated about is it just always feels like the NHL is taking these things away from them. Islanders fans are always frustrated with the lack of respect it feels like the Islanders get from the NHL at points. And it just feels like this is another example of the NHL just never letting the Islanders fans have something nice. Like, you have an All-Star game to finally look forward to happening in New York, happening in UBS Arena, and now there's talks of them taking it away, and that can definitely be frustrating. Islanders fans are always complaining that they never get the opportunity to be in a Winter Classic or any major games like that, and now you're also taking away the opportunity to host the All-Star game, or at least it looks like they're talking about it. Now, I also really want to talk about what this can mean for the future of the Four Nations face-off, because I think this is really interesting. Obviously, the NHL is going to do something like this again. I mean, look at how well this experiment went for the NHL. The amount of views that this got was spectacular, especially considering it took so much attention away from other sports like the NBA, where the NHL is competing with. In previous seasons, the NHL All-Star Game has really struggled against the NBA All-Star Game, while the NBA All-Star Game is also nothing special to behold. It has been getting a lot more viewership than the NHL All-Star Game. Out of all the All-Star Games in professional sports, the NHL one has been doing by far the worst. So to have an All-Star break and instead use it to have a Four Nations face-off where players were really playing best on best hockey. I mean, 9.3 million viewers at the peak, 10.4 million viewers. This is absolutely huge for the NHL, and it's definitely going to do a lot of good for growing the game. That's actually one of the main reasons why the All-Star Game is even relevant. It does do a lot towards growing the game. I know a lot of people don't seem to enjoy the All-Star Game unless you're huge gamblers and you like to gamble on who's going to win the hardest shot competition, that type of thing. The people who the All-Star Game is mainly focused towards are children, and children enjoy the All-Star Game. They enjoy seeing their favorite players do skills competitions and play with each other, and like that 3-on-3 fast format, it's really good for getting kids into the game. They also do little things like the mascot game, and I definitely think this would have been a really cool opportunity for the Islanders to get more kids involved, and have kids get excited about the All-Star Game, and potentially have more Islander fans in the future. I definitely think there is some good to the All-Star Game. Granted, the Four Nations tournament was really, really good. It went well. And my question now is, clearly it seems like the NHL might not want to do another All-Star game because it might feel a little bit embarrassing at this point to have all this viewership, to have this huge win, to then go back to having another All-Star game where nobody seems to care about it. It definitely would not look great on the NHL, and that's definitely why I think they're considering canceling the All-Star game. That being said, the other thing you do have to consider is, does this viewership happen for the Four Nations face-off if you have every single season? Sure, it was great that one year, but if the NHL plans on doing this again and again, will it kind of lose that new factor? And also, I really wonder what owners will think about this, because while the Four Nations face-off was great for growing the game and the players were really excited about it, I'm sure there are a couple of owners that were pretty pissed off for this Four Nations tournament. I mean, the Boston Bruins losing McAvoy in the way they did, they have to be absolutely furious with what happened on this tournament. Other teams, I mean, Florida losing Tkachuk, Austin Matthews came back pretty injured. These teams' owners are definitely frustrated that they're losing their top players for playoff runs because of a tournament. That's definitely something that you also have to consider. I wonder, maybe they consider doing this at a different point, but it'll be really interesting to see, and I definitely wonder, if the Islanders end up losing this All-Star game, what happens? Is there just going to be nothing during that 2-week span? Or will there not be a big break as in typical seasons? Or could we see potentially another Four Nations type series face-off happening? And maybe that can end up being really good for the Islanders. They were supposed to host the All-Star game. Maybe they'd be able to host a game like that instead. And I would definitely be a lot more excited to see a Four Nations type face-off at UBS Arena as opposed to another All-Star game. That being said, let me know what you think. Are you disappointed that the Islanders will not be getting the opportunity, or at least it seems like they will not be getting an opportunity to host an All-Star game if the NHL does go ahead and cancel it? Or are you kind of just glad that the All-Star game is starting to go away, or at least it seems like they're talking about getting rid of this All-Star game? Again, none of this is official. It's just, but Pierre LeBrun, it says the NHL owners are talking about it, and with them talking about it, it definitely seems like that is something that can happen. Let me know what your thoughts about this on the comments below, and as always, if you're not already, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and let's go Islanders.